yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. LaMalfa, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. Appreciate both of you governors for traveling here today and bringing your firsthand expertise on dealing with vast spaces of federal land in your states. Governor Noem, the proposal says conservation leases are not intended to provide a mechanism for precluding other uses, such as grazing, mining, and recreation. Conservation leases should not disturb existing authorizations, valid existing rights, or state or tribal land use management. However, if the administration determines other uses such as grazing and energy production are incompatible with the lease, those uses would not be allowed and could be prohibited indefinitely from these lands, even after the expiration of a conservation lease, which would effectively lock up these lands indefinitely for multiple use. So do we pretty much have a de facto national monument or wilderness area by a designation like this? Do you believe this is their ultimate goal?
It gives them the authority to. This proposed rule absolutely allows them to look at large landscapes and to shut the public out of them, from accessing that, from utilizing it, from no longer being able to hunt and fish, engage in outdoor recreation, from mining, permitting, grazing, all activities. It creates a new mechanism, which I will remind you, Congress has no authority to do this. You're overstepping your authority, or that BLM has no authority to do. Congress is the only one who has the authority to put forward a rule like this to establish something like a conservation lease, which can collect fees to go out and prioritize conservation over all other activities. BLM has no authority to be able to do what they're trying to do in this rule here today. There's no consequences for violation of these conservation leases as well. No punishment if the rules of the game are not followed. What's interesting to me is there's no guidelines on who can purchase a conservation lease and who can't. What's to prevent China from coming in and purchasing up conservation leases on our federal lands and therefore having some control and authority over them? It also allows BLM to go around the NEPA process, which, listen, I'm just a big believer that if Americans have to follow the NEPA process, then the federal government should have to follow the NEPA process. If we're going to go through that, everybody should be treated equally under the law. It's burdensome. It will shut down economic activity in these regions of the country, which right now facing the inflation and the stagnation that we're seeing, keeping these productive areas contributing to our American energy independence and our food supply is critically important. So it's ill-advised, and what's interesting to me is watching how they allow bureaucrats in DC to make these decisions under this proposed rule and taking that authority away from the local BLM offices, because I think Governor Gordon would tell you, and I will tell you as well, we have good relationships with our local BLM offices because those people actually do live there and they do interact with people that are out there working on stewardship practices on the land. This rule changes that. It takes those decisions away from those local authorities and moves it to bureaucrats within the agency at the higher level that many times may not have stepped a foot in our state.
Thank you. It's apparent to me when I do flyover country coming from my home in California to the.
Don't do that. You need to stop.
I don't consider it that. I consider it God's country, but especially at night, once you get west of the Mississippi, there's not a whole lot of lights down there. But I do notice there's a whole lot of problems with the lands that are already managed by BLM or U.S. Forest Service of not having a whole heck of a lot going on in their management. So I wonder, both governors, how do you feel it currently is going with the record of land management that our Forest Service is doing on helping prevent fire? You mentioned the Black Hills there. I look at million-acre fires in my district. What's the track record of them, and should we be giving them more responsibility over more land, such as this pie-in-the-sky 30-30 deal? Governor Gordon, let me give you a shot.
Well, thank you very much, and I'll give you an experience that we had recently in 2020 on something we called the Mullen Fire. It was an area that had been logged before, and is an area that had some burn scars there before as well. It's also an area where there's a wilderness called Savage Run. This lies just a little bit north of the Colorado border. In 2020, we had a serious fire, very dry conditions. Because there was so much dead beetle kill timber, that fire was almost impossible to put out. It burned for quite a long time. And here's the thing, where it entered into either timber sales that had been harvested or places that had burn scars, the fire was able to be kept at bay. In places where it had old-growth forest, in places where it was a wilderness, that fire escaped all bounds and kept moving. This is very similar to what you had in California.
Yes, sir, like the Tahoe pilot plant that Chairman and I and others have visited, when the fire hits that, you can actually knock the fire down. It actually works. Will not work very well under this rule. I yield back, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes Ranking Member Grijalva for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.